Welcome to the new episode of the ILA Talkshow. Cary McQueen, she's based in San Francisco, and she's the founder of Art with Impact. Welcoming Cary McQueen. Cary, it's good to see you. How have you been?
I'm doing, pretty good. How
Great.
about you? I mean, it's a tricky question in the pandemic, right? So,
It's a loaded question. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm really happy to hear you laughing. I know all of us are going through equal amounts of or similar amounts of craziness with an year and a month into COVID. But I'm really glad to have you in our circle here at the ILA because of the kind of work that you're doing. And I would love to hear more about how your journey started. I know you did started this 10 years ago and how your journey started and how you've been doing what you've been doing, which is really inspiring. So over to you, Cary.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but I think the most straightforward is essentially that I art is my first language. I really feel like the big breakthroughs that I've had in my life have always been as a result of art experiences. And so the question for me has never been, can art change the world, but more, how can I be part of art changing the world? And doing all of the things that we know we need to do to create justice for humans and for the environment and for animals and all of the things that we need to be working on. How do we use art for that? And so this organization really was the result of years of sort of background thinking around how that could come to be,
Mhm.
as well as a bunch of experiences that I had in my career prior to this opportunity. And so one one story that I think is really poignant around the founding of the organization was um, an experience that I had getting to run grassroots film screenings in Kenya
Hmm.
uh, a couple of years prior to founding this organization, where we were getting to tell African stories to Africans
Wow.
around how the, as opposed to like Western answers,
Right.
what are ways that we can combat HIV and AIDS on the African continent. And what was so cool about the project that I got to work on was that people went from not wanting to get tested, not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to like engage in the topic because it's so scary and hard,
Sure. Yeah.
to in 2 hours after hearing their own stories shared
Mm.
with them, being willing to get tested and take next steps. And that moment for me was was huge. And I realized that the power of film in particular can be really transformative fast.
Mm.
And that's a thing. My background was in the fine arts, and so with
Yeah.
classical music and with the traditional visual arts, you need to actually have um, some prep before you're ready to have a transformative experience. But with film, it can happen right away. So
Yeah.
that's
Right.
really that was the jump start that got this specific idea going.
Fantastic. Yeah. So in the films that you were making, especially the ones you did in Kenya, did you feel that it was the storytelling that was predominantly the selling point to them, or was it the choice of visuals and the color and the graphics being Afrocentric, or is it the same thing that you're telling an Afrocentric story? Um,
Yeah, um, I think that they're too intertwined to separate out. But
mm,
if I were to pick a piece, I think that, and this is true with the films in our collection too, and the work that we do
mm,
now with Art with Impact with mental health issues. Um, I think that the beautiful thing about art is that it can be a window and a mirror, but a lot of the times, especially for underrepresented populations, basically not white humans,
mm,
it's just a window. And I think that the power of having a mirror to reflect back some of your own experiences in an empowering way, and in a way that respects your journey and your story and identifies the uniqueness of it, that's super powerful. And so I think that the story has to be told well. The art has to be good. Like the production value has to be high. The all of the pieces have to come together for that to be effective. But I do think that having really diverse stories that allow people to see themselves changes the way that art can function. And I think that especially in the United States, we have really focused only on Western art traditions,
Right.
when a lot of the people in this country don't have that background. And so it's a little bit irrelevant to their lived experience and the way that they grew up and the stories that they have at home and all of those pieces.
Right. Right. That's a beautiful point. And I love the visual that you just gave me of the window, because it's not just a window. It almost seems like the curtains have been, the curtains are closed, right? And you are not even seeing that the windows. First, you're kind of doing this and say, oh, there's a window. And then the person goes to the window and you're dealing with what may be familiar to them, but then you show them the mirror, and then they're able to kind of reflect back onto their rich heritage and rich cultures and talk about Afrocentric stories. That's phenomenal. So then you did that in Kenya, and then you moved to San Francisco, or you moved back to the States, and then decided to do art with impact.
Yeah, so no, I was living in San Francisco when I did that project. I hired an old family friend who's Kenyan, grew up in Nairobi, lives in Nairobi. She managed the project for me over there. And basically my idea was, as little, basically we provided money and then we really left it up to humans on the ground to make sure that everything happened. But yeah, that was as a consulting gig for a production company. And then that was the thing that sort of just was like, now how do I translate this beautiful experience, this like these fast transformations,
Right.
Into something that is closer to home, literally.
Yeah.
And what do we do, and what does that look like? And for me, mental health is the foundation of social justice. I don't think that we achieve justice prior to establishing wellness in ourselves. And so that is the focus. That's been the focus. That's been the goal of the focus from the beginning. And then again, the question that I always start with is, how do we use art to change the world? And so once I sort of had this, and now I'm sort of jumping all over the place, but now we use different modalities as well. So we're now doing poetry, and we're doing theater, and we're also doing film. But the starting place was really this idea of film, this idea of how do we tell a story in a very compelling way in a super short amount of time that allows people the opportunity to reflect in a new way. And so that was the jumping off point for us.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. So you're dealing with all the art modalities, and you're talking about mental health, and it's a beautiful thing you just said, that if you want social justice, you really have to love yourself. And there's this wise person I know said that if you don't have empathy for yourself, you can't really have empathy for others. It starts with you. And I think it's really, really powerful. And I'm just really wanting to see like examples and things that you've done. So I believe you have slides that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah. Okay, super. So maybe we can get the slides going, Anoop. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just put together a little bit of a quick overview of who we are, mission, and our vision. The picture in the lower left-hand corner is all of our team the last time we were able to actually get together. We all got to be together. And then in those other two pictures on the top are, again, when we got to be in person. And here's some pictures of my team members. But if we could go to the next slide, I'll get us sort of going. So yeah, as we've just been talking about, why we're here, why we exist as an organization, is that we believe that addressing mental health will help build the path towards social justice. And I just plopped some pictures in here. These are some of the students who are telling their own mental health stories at our workshops. And as you can see, everybody has, everybody has a mental health story. And we get to hear a lot of them through the work that we're doing. So that's a really important part of what, of how this all comes together, and sort of a theme. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is our mission statement. And it's short, but jam-packed. So I like to sort of break it out a little bit. So our mission is to promote mental wellness by creating space for young people to learn and connect through art and media. And each one of these components has sort of more unpacking to do. So, for example, there's a lot of mental health goals that are important. So eliminating the stigma around mental illness is important. Making it okay to talk about mental health is important. All of these different pieces. But for us, when we think about our end goal, where we want to be, is we want humans who are mentally well. So
Mm-hmm.
whether or not they have a mental illness, whether or not they've lived through trauma, whether or not they have gone through any of the complexities that exist in humans,
Mm-hmm.
um, they can still achieve wellness. And that's where we want to get, to a place where people are exploring their best selves. So that's why that's our first core component, promoting mental wellness for all humans everywhere. The next piece for us is creating space. So there has, oh, sorry, previous slide still. I'm going to be on this one for quite a minute. So yeah, we want to make space, carve out space and time to have these conversations. So prior to the pandemic, we were only ever in person. So we go to college campuses, and we have our workshops in person. Now we're creating space online, and we're creating carved out, safe, brave spaces for humans to have conversations about their own wellness through art. And that's really a core piece, is that we can rush through life, or we can choose to carve out the places and pieces that we need in order to get the important things done, like promoting
When you
mental
say
health.
space, sorry, Carrie, when you say space, are you talking about physical space or mental space, emotional space, or all of it?
All of it.
Okay.
And that's why we used this specific word. I mean,
Nice.
as I was saying before, like we were only in person. I do think that there's a magical thing that happens when humans experience art together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even like you think about it, museum experiences, you're having your own personal experience, but other people are having their personal experience. And it's different than just like looking at a book at home, right? That collective experience is incredibly powerful. Same with the theater, same with art in general that you see in person.
Right, right. Yeah.
So we were only in person, but a really interesting thing that has happened since we've been online for this past year is a whole bunch of humans have showed up that I don't think would have come to our in-person workshops before, because mental health is still super stigmatized. Having these conversations is still hard, and people don't want, like, our culture has told us that if you're struggling with your mental health, you're crazy, and if you're crazy, you're bad. And like these are terrible messages that people just have started to believe and internalize. And so so we've been creating these online spaces the last year, and we've gotten a whole bunch of people that I don't think we would have gotten otherwise. So moving forward, we're going to be continuing to have both in-person and online spaces.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
The next piece is young people. So we're really focused, I'm a big believer that you like do your thing specifically and well. And so we can't be all things to all people. So where we're focused is on 16 to 25-year-olds. And this is a group of people in mental health that's called transitional age youth, is the name in the sector for it. But essentially it's this, in my opinion, it's this magic time, right? People are old enough to know who they are, and they're young enough to still be able to make decisions that will impact the rest of their life and the rest of the contributions that they can make to the world in their life. And so that's where we're focused. The other important thing about this age group is that 75% of mental illnesses present for the first time between 16 and 25. So if we can do early intervention or even prevention, we can have dramatically better outcomes for humans. So 1 in 5 people are living with a diagnosable mental illness at any given time. 50%
Not
of
just young
people will
people.
have,
Yes. Sorry, forgive me.
pardon?
Not just young people, but you're saying people in general. That 20% of the population is living with some mental health issue,
Yep.
knowingly or unknowingly. Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And that's a good point. So that statistic is diagnosable, not diagnosed. So it doesn't, so if when they do like large surveys, they test for symptoms, then that's what that looks like.
Okay.
So Yeah, so if we can do prevention, then we get just much, much better outcomes for everybody. This next piece is learning and connecting. So that's really our two goals for these spaces with young people that promote mental wellness, is to learn about yourself, to connect with yourself, to learn about others and connect with others. Those connections are really what we're trying to create in order to do these things that we missed and that we listed, excuse me. And then the
Mhm.
last piece is how we do it is art. And when we, when we first wrote the mission statement, it just said through art. But this is, I'm sure you come across this kind of thing all the time, but funders were very confused because they didn't consider film to be art. So we switched it to art and media so that people wouldn't be confused about what we were talking about. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that, when we, in the world that several of us operate and we need to go to funders and investors, and some of the language which for us is, yeah, of course, art. I mean, even food is art, even,
yeah.
so, but yeah, totally. This is really interesting that you said that. I face that too, yeah, you know,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it's a thing. And
it's
then the
okay.
next slide, please. I think this is our
Hey,
last
there's
one.
a
So
question
these are,
sorry, there's a
excuse me.
question that just came in. I don't know if you want to answer it now or
Oh, I'm
uh,
happy to. Yeah. What's the question?
what kind of mental illness are you focusing on? There's a variety of
That's
mental, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually use very broad definitions. So the way that we define mental illness is something that is uncontrollable, like it's not something you chose. It's a morally neutral thing that gets in the way of you being your best self. So we do operate within the Western medical model, where we work in the United States and Canada. So that is the modality that we
Mhm.
live in and that we're surrounded by. It's the water we swim in. But we don't take the position that diagnoses are the end all be all. We don't take the position that um, there's anything that's like more or less important. What we're trying to get humans to get to sort of process is that they're the expert of their own mental health. They're the
Mhm.
people who can decide if something is getting in the way of them being their best self. And if that's the case, if they are, if there is something that's getting in the way of their being their best self, they're going to be the best determiner of how to address that. So the short answer to which mental illnesses we um, address is all of them. But the long answer is even that framework puts people in boxes that we don't think are necessary. That
Mhm.
said, diagnoses are very, very helpful for lots of people. It can feel like such a relief to be like, oh, this isn't just me. This is
Mhm.
1 in 5 of us are going through something similar to this experience that I'm having right now. Like, I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to, keep it hidden. Like, these are symptoms that lots and lots and lots of people have both had and recovered from or can treat effectively. Um, but we also work with a lot of students for whom diagnoses aren't helpful at all, because especially once you start getting lots and lots of comorbidities, which is effectively common,
Mhm.
or especially common. Like, if you have like 6 diagnosable mental illnesses, then
Mhm.
who are you? Like, that starts to be not that super helpful anymore. And so what you can start to look at is, where is my wellness? Where is my best self? As opposed to looking at all of these like illnesses and things that are like holding you back. You can look at the reverse, like, where am I
Yes.
strongest?
So maybe it may seem like a minor shift of thinking, but I think it's substantial in that you don't think about it as the illness, but think about the solution that will impact 1 to 6 to how many ever ailments you have. So understood. I hope that answers the question for the audience member. So back to you, Carrie. Thanks.
Yeah, so these are some of the these are actually all of the programs that we run. Um, and I'm just gonna, I've been talking a lot and I know we want to do conversation, so I'll try to go a little bit more quickly through this.
No, it's all
But
right.
so the upper left image where we have the hands and the butterflies and the fence, that program is Voices with Impact. And so these are production grants that we provide every year on topics that are related to mental health, but that people aren't talking about very much.
Mhm.
So this year, this is the poster for this year. This year, we're doing 2 we have two different specific issues that folks are making films on right now. They're
Mhm.
almost done. One is mental health issues specific to Black people, and the other
Mhm.
one is mental health issues specific to immigration experiences. So we'll have 5 new films on each of these topics that will then premiere in June, and then will be juried. Not all of, they don't automatically go into our collection, but they'll be juried, and if they make it, they'll go into our collection and be shown at our workshops. So that's Voices with Impact. Movies for Mental Health is our most popular program. It's the first
Mhm.
one that we developed. It's the one that came out of all of those insights that I shared in the beginning of our conversation. That's a
Mhm.
workshop where we go to colleges and universities and we show 3 films from our library, which currently has over 90 films, but we pick 3. We very, very intentionally curate 3 films based on the realities of that campus and what people are going through, and as well as lived experience speakers that we'll have on the panel. We show the films, people explore for themselves, and they have conversations in small groups and large groups.
Mm.
It looked like there was a question. Should I pause here or should
Oh,
we?
you want to ask you? I just wrote to us. We'll address it at the end. But if you want, since you're talking about film, we can do it now. She's asking, or our guest is asking, specifically, film is your medium. Have you observed specific colors that young people choose as they begin their transformation and integration process?
That's such a cool
Clearly,
question. I love
right?
that.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly this is a group of light, color, sound people. So, so that's why that question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We have films that are um, very color um, intense, and that like stick to very like either cool hues or warm hues or whatever. I think that in our work, it's less about a color or um, an implementation of an idea as how that supports the idea of the story. So, I mean, we have a film that I'm thinking of off the top of my head called Blue, where the film itself is quite blue. The color design is very much around that color. But when the protagonist of the film is sort of overcoming her past demons,
Mhm.
the color becomes very yellow. And so we have that shift and that opposite kind of exploration. Um, and I think that because the colors are so saturated, it really makes a big impact in the way that people experience the work. But yeah, I don't think that was, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but I love the question. That's awesome.
Yeah, we can definitely get back to it at the end because there's another really good question that's come in, but that's a big picture question. So why don't we get, I know you have a lot of material to cover, so why don't we just circle back at the end on that? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so movies for mental health. Then the next workshop that you see there is poetry for mental health. We have that is a workshop where folks do a process that we've designed called Immerse, Explore, Express. And folks will watch. We focus on specific topics on that workshop. And so we've got 3 different versions of the poetry workshop. One focuses on the mental health impacts of the culture of masculinity. One focuses on the mental health impacts of mental health issues that are specific to LGBTQIA people. And
Mhm.
then the third one focuses on hope in the face of hopelessness. And so those are the 3 types of poetry for mental health workshops that we offer.
Mhm.
People watch a film from our collection. They explore it together through conversation in the chat currently because we're online only. And then they do free writes where they like get all their thoughts out on paper. And then we do a thing that we called Find the Sculpture, where your free write has put all of the clay out for you. And now you are gonna pull away and find the sculpture within that to create your own poem. And so we do
Wonderful.
that model 3 different times. And folks make the most beautiful work. It's so cool. It's really, really fun to watch. The next workshop that you see is called Our Bodies, Our Minds. That's an in-person only workshop. That one uses theater modalities to create empathy and solutions around how communities can be more supportive of survivors of sexual violence. So it looks at the mental health impacts of sexual violence on survivors, as well as communities, and then looks at how we can be as a culture more supportive, because unfortunately there's just tons of survivors walking around, and how do we address that in a compassionate and loving way? The next, I'm just going clockwise. The next one is called Continued Connections. And this is a program that we just launched this year in response to the pandemic, which is basically responding to the fact that people have been so isolated. And so we do these workshops at schools, but then we're like gone, right? So this idea is to have online regular experiences that people can participate in between when we do these kinds of workshops. So Continued Connections we have like email creativity and writing prompts that come once a week that you can sign up for. We have like a video training series on how to use film to start conversation. We have weekly sessions called Sanctuary Space, which are really designed to be a place where people can come and explore ideas in a safe way using art. And those are really varied. They're all over the place. The last one we did was people were doing like sketching and doodling together. The one before that was looking at like how representation brings in how representation can be used to create wellness. So there's all these different topics. And then the last workshop that we have, this one on the lower left, is called Black Mental Health Matters. And that's a program that we're piloting this year. And it is specifically for Black students at non-historically Black colleges and universities. So the majority of schools where Black students are in the minority, looking at how they can support their own wellness. And that's that one is going really, really well. Allies are welcome to attend, non-Black students are welcome to attend, but the space really centers Black students. So those are all of our workshops, and that is actually where we are. I have this alarm that keeps going off, and I'm sorry about that. Those are the workshops that we run, and that's how we do the work. That's how we're currently making this all happen.
Fantastic, yeah, fantastic. Is there more slides? Are there more slides or?
Nope, that's the end.
Oh, perfect. Oh, perfect. Great. Wow. So listen, there definitely going to be a lot of questions connected to the workshops, but I do want to get to the questions that have come in already, which are big picture questions. One is that if you read the question here, it says most people who have a mental illness disagree that they have a mental illness. They are not cooperative to get treatment. North American law does not force an individual who does not want to get treatment. That is why most people never get the necessary treatment. If this is the case, that is why most people never get. If this is the case, how do you deal with this situation?
Okay. Yeah, so there's a little misinformation in the setup. The vast majority of people living with mental illness have depression, anxiety, things that they definitely know that they have, because it's a very conscious thing that gets in your way. There's a very small percentage of mental illnesses that part of the symptomology is a thing called Anazignosia, which is where you don't know you have mental illness.
What's it called?
So it's called Anazignosia.
Anazignosia. Okay. That is when you don't know that you have it.
Yeah, that's a symptom. It's a symptom of a very small portion of mental illnesses. So
it's not the same as denial, right? I mean,
no, denial is you have it, but you are telling yourself you don't.
Yeah. Okay.
So anazignosia is you literally don't know that you have the thing. So examples of that are like personality disorders, like narcissistic personality, for example. They literally think they are that important. Like they don't realize that that's faulty thinking. Same with like Another example is some versions of things that are within the schizophrenic
Well, yeah, right.
spectrum.
Uh-huh.
People don't realize that um, the it's called psychosis, but where they think something is true that is not true, like
Mm.
the realities that most of us don't live with, they believe that that really is it. So it's a small percentage. I mean, off the cuff, I would put it at probably 1 or 2% of mental illnesses. And the person who wrote in the question is absolutely correct. For those people,
Mm.
that is the hardest piece, and that there's no easy answer. Um, the good news is that that is a very small portion of people who are living with mental health issues.
Mhm.
And so it's not something that I think. And the other good news is that most people who experience anazignosia have mental illnesses that aren't dangerous to others. They basically just live in their own world. So they're usually not dangerous to themselves either. It's just sort of hard. It's hard to exist around. So that was
So
sort of a lot of.
I mean, the work that you're doing, right? Um, what we're saying is that people who are don't know that they have the illness, and the word is anagnostic, anagnos, um, that the work that you're doing actually draws them out to kind of embrace their uniqueness, or is it? It's not a diagnosis tool for sure, right? I mean, it's a way of healing, like you were saying, finding a solution. So how does it work? Like if I say I was like 18 and losing my mind, doing silly things. I'm not trying to be autobiographical, but you know, so you suddenly I find out about this program, and uh, and I come there, and so what are the what how would it pan out? Like if I was an 18-year-old kid, uh, complete loose cannon, and I come into one of your workshops, what could be the steps?
So the reason that we use art is because we don't know who that 18-year-old is, right? So we
Mhm.
don't have any idea what they're coming in with, where they're coming from. But
Mhm.
if they watch a piece of art that is really beautifully made and that is um, really well done, then they'll get out of it what they need to get out of it. So all of our pieces all of the work that we show in our film-based workshops
Mhm.
are very, very short. And they give you the opportunity to reflect for twice as long as you watched. So the films are 5 minutes, and then there's 10 minutes of reflection for each one. So the idea basically is like, you get to come in, we tell you from the jump, you're the expert on your mental health. We have no idea what's the
Mhm.
best solution for you.
Mhm.
Now, here are some stories. How do you relate to those stories? Is there something you might want to explore for yourself? Is there not something you want to explore for yourself? I mean, the basic idea is this loose cannon can decide for themselves if they want to explore, and we'll see if they do. My
Mhm.
experience with all of our work is that people really do. People want to be their best self. That's just part of being human.
Mhm.
And so providing a really brave space to explore that
Mhm.
gets folks to the place where they can be like, oh, I may be making choices that aren't in my best interest, that don't allow
Right,
me to be my best
right,
self.
right. So it kind of helps you find your higher self, if you would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that I mean, the 18-year-old that I'm referring to, I mean, I would work in theater, and I found lighting, which I've been doing since then, as my way of finding my higher self. So I stopped getting into fights. I was less crazy, and it was really fantastic. The minute I put that turquoise blue color on that little park, and this is back in the day when we had those big halogen park cans. They weren't they're not the small LED ones like we have now. You're talking about those big cannons. And I put that color, and I was in love. I was like, yep, this is what I want to do, and
Yeah.
that gave me a direction through my architecture education. So I really connect with what you just said. And I think it's phenomenal that you're doing it for so many people as a program, as a workshop. Well, goosebumps. Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank
And
you.
I have one question before you go, though, which I promised you that I would ask you this. Is that what is your that one project that you haven't yet started work on, but you plan to get there in the near future? Not a bucket list. I'm just talking about in the next 10, 15 years, something like that, you know.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay. So yeah, I actually hadn't thought about this in advance, but the first thing that comes to mind, I'd really love to work with young people who are in the juvenile justice system.
Oh,
That's an
fantastic.
area that we haven't,
Mm,
where we haven't been, and I think that art and creativity, um, they're the first thing that gets pulled from public education. They're the first thing that get pulled from any kind of process that people have, and I just suspect that a
mm,
lot of kids who get in trouble could really use an opportunity to share their voices and explore who they are and use art. So that's an area that I'd love to get to. Yeah, you said 10 to 15 years. I had answers for like 1 or 2 years, but
yeah,
that's a big thing.
yeah.
And I don't know how to do it yet, but I want to do that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. And you know, like many moons ago, I was presenting to these architects in Miami through the AIA, which is American Institute of Architects, and talking about color and light and how it impacts the overall physiology and psychology. And one of the people there had worked in the prison system, and he said, Abhay, do you know about the study where they painted the prison's cells and the common spaces in a very light, beautiful pink? I'm like, really? Like you have all these tough guys who are there, and you making them sit in a pink space. They said, yeah, and there are statistics that show that all the violence that was happening while you're incarcerated reduced substantially. I don't remember the numbers, but he did cite a study. So I think using color, art, media for the juvenile system is, I mean, that's just phenomenal. Yeah. If there's anything that we can do to help you in furthering that, please let us know, because you're doing great work, Cary, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.